don't do this a lot, but when I do it, it means the world to me, and it's like fuel in my tank, because I come out and I get to see the real people who are really doing the hard work to keep this nation on the right track. And so I sat here, Billy and I were saying that how good it is just to be here and to see you guys. And I'm thankful for what you do, and that you care, and that you're out here tonight. And I see a few faces. I actually got to come speak to you guys in 2017 when we were we were brand new, and we were Transparency Texas then. And so it's fun to be back, and I'll tell you guys a little bit about our journey from Transparency Texas to Transparency USA. But before I do that, I wanted to say thank you to you guys just for what you do, and tell you how much it blesses me to see this meeting. And then Marty, I wanted to say, it's Marty, right?
Yes, ma'am.
I wanted to say thank you to you for praying for me and for the words I have to say, because without that I can do nothing, right? None of us can do anything that matters without that. So yes, I run an organization called Transparency USA, and we started here in Texas in 2016. I'll tell you guys a little bit. I think what I'll do is just kind of give you a little background about where we came from, what we're doing now, and then, but really, please stop me anywhere along the way and ask your questions. And then really I want to know, after I tell you a little bit about what we're doing, kind of what you think about money in politics, or what you hear when people are talking about that. And I'd love to know kind of what kind of questions we could help answer for grassroots organizations like yours. So we started in 2016. We saw what was going on. So in every state, there's an agency that the state level political action committees and candidates, where they have to turn in their campaign finance records. Basically all their donors, what they're getting, how much they're getting, and how they're spending it. So in Texas, as you probably know, it's all that is kept and recorded by the Texas Ethics Commission. So, but what we were seeing with the Texas Ethics Commission was, I mean, their job really, the whole idea behind this is to hold politicians accountable and to minimize corruption. But we saw in some instances where it was being weaponized against grassroots activists, this data, or this process, that made it a little easier, was being weaponized against grassroots activists instead of being used to hold politicians accountable. And also at about the same time, a study was done out of DC, called a group in DC called the Campaign Finance Institute. And they studied these 50 agencies in the 50 states. And as it turned out, Texas ranked 50th, I'm not kidding, 50th out of 50 on a number of the areas that they studied, like user friendliness for the average citizen who wanted to find out something, transparency, time it took you to find the data you were looking for on the site. So, you know, 50th out of 50 is not okay for Texans. So, a couple of friends of mine, we decided we would try to do, well, we've got a few months, let's see if we can put a little bit of money into this thing and see if we can put up a site that kind of mirrors what the Texas Ethics Commission is doing, but actually make it usable and searchable for everyday citizens. So we did that. We got it running in late 2016, kind of cruising along. I got to come talk to you guys in 2017 and tell you what we were doing. And then I went along doing that for a few years, and in about 2019, we caught the attention of a website, an organization called Ballotpedia. Are any of you guys familiar with Ballotpedia? Have you heard of them? They're the largest nonpartisan political website that exists. And so they have, if you are looking for anything about politics, they call themselves the Encyclopedia of American Politics, and they are. They have nonpartisan information about races, candidates, how things work, what just definitions, anything you want to see. Well, they kind of saw what we were doing in Texas, and they came to us and said, hey, could we partner with you? We want to publish your Texas data. Turns out we were the only outfit in the United States that was publishing state-level campaign finance data in real time. And by in real time, once it was released by the TEC, we would get it, clean it up, and get it live within 24, 48 hours. The only other organization doing it was collecting the data and putting it live like a year later or after the elections. So honestly, I didn't even know any better. When I started doing this, I was talking to a friend, like, wait, there's this real need in Texas politics, there's kind of this vacuum. I'm like, why don't we do that? Trouble is, I don't know anything about campaign finance. So I went on this like steep learning curve to learn this stuff. But I didn't know, I just thought if the data's not live quickly, like how are people going to use it, right? Well, it doesn't do them any good after the election. So I just didn't know any better. So we were getting it up really fast in real time, basically. So Ballotpedia liked what we were doing so much, they partnered with us in 2019 to add 8 swing states. So in partnership with them, we picked out 8 states that we thought were important around the United States and added them to our site.
Pennsylvania, Wisconsin,
Yes, Ohio, Michigan and Minnesota. Arizona, Florida. Yes, sir. That's very kind of you that you've looked and you see that. So.
No, I didn't look. I just knew what the swing state
was. Well, there you go. There you go. I will tell you one mistake we made. In 2019, we were like trying to figure out. We had this list. We were narrowing it down and debating about which ones, and Georgia was on the list. And I said, Georgia's not going to be a swing state. Georgia's reliable. We picked Ohio instead of Georgia. Turns out Ohio is much more reliably red than Georgia has turned out to be a swing state. So Georgia's on our target list now. But
they don't cheat as much in Ohio as they do in Georgia.
This is interesting to me, though, because I think this is where I see God's hand on what we've been doing. Because in 2019, we're building this out, and we start working to get all the data and get these extra states online, and we launch it in 2020. Well, what happened in 2020? Obviously, COVID, right? So for the first time ever, people are realizing, oh, it's not Washington that decides whether my business stays open. It's my state governor. It's my state legislators. And they're seeing the importance of how their state government's actually impacting their lives. And for too long, I think most of us that followed politics, we tended to focus on the drama playing out in DC on the cable news network, right? And so 2020 happens right when we're launching in all these states, focusing on state level campaign finance. And so we suddenly get this huge spike in traffic. We got asked to add Virginia in 2021 because they had, off-year elections. So in last year, they had their Virginia and their legislative races. 2021, we added Virginia. Since then, we've been approached by people in Indiana and California to add those states. So we hit 12 states this year. Our last 12th one was California. It's just 12 states, but that was a big deal for us, kind of a tipping point, because we hit 51% of the U.S. population covered when we added California. So we're real excited about
added
that.
California?
We added California this year.
Is that a swing state?
It's not a swing state. It is not a swing state. But people approached us in California and said, we need this data desperately, and they're willing to fund it. So that's kind of, it's been a mix. That's what happened with Indiana too. It's not so much a swing state, but donors in Indiana came to us and said, we need what you're doing in our state. So that's fun, but the same thing happened again. We had COVID in 2020 when we added 8 states, and it caused the interest and the traffic on our site to really spike. Of course, there was no way. We started working on it in 2019. We didn't see that coming. Only God saw that coming. And then this year, right when we've got 3 more states online, we've hit 51% of the U.S. population. The Supreme Court sends the life issue back to the states. And the Supreme Court says we're about to send all these other issues back to the states. So once again, we see a lot more interest in what's going on the state level than not just what's going on in DC. And we've seen a huge spike in our traffic again. So just this month, we're hitting over 1 million unique individuals on our site, a little boring campaign finance site. We're getting over 1 million people every month. This month, we're going to hit somewhere between 1.5 million and 2 people coming. So it's exciting. It's exciting to see people having that interest. Yes, ma'am.
I think you kind of answered a little bit, but I'm curious, I guess that you're funded by individuals or organizations?
Yes, all the above. Private individuals, and then some foundations like Ballotpedia helps support us, and they have a foundation, the Lucy Burns Foundation, that supports them. And so it's a mix, for sure. Some of you in here in this room have been gracious to support us too, so I'm thankful for that. So that's kind of how we got where we are today. But let me tell you, oh, I forgot, let me pass these out. I brought these and I'm not giving them to you. I'll send some down the, sure. I'll hand some over on this side of the room too. So here's a few. This tells you a little bit about what we do. Pass those around if you want. The states we're in. So on our site, you can search by donor. You can search by donor name, candidate, campaign, incumbent name, or political action committee, and you can see all the money coming in and all the money going out. But what has been exciting to me, in addition to just making this available so that everyday citizens can see it, understand it, put it to work, is we're actually seeing behavior change from this. So we've seen behavior change from donors, from activists, and just from everyday citizens. I'll give you a little example of each one of them. So one of the top donors in Texas called me late last year and said there's an organization, you guys would know the organization, it's one of the top PACs in Texas, was asking this donor for a six-figure donation. And he said, Tracy, will you help me figure out if I give them this money, will I be giving against my own interest? So I was able to look at who this organization was, who definitely considers themselves center-right, and who they were supporting in the Texas primaries. And I was able to say, okay, look, here's the list of who this PAC has supported in primaries. And here, Mr. Donor, here's who you have supported in the PAC, in Texas primaries. And in many, many cases, you two were on different sides of the fence in the Republican primary. So you would, in fact, be giving against your own interest. So he would have had no way to know that. So we impacted donor behavior there.
Did he give you the money instead?
He did give me some money. Not then, but since then, which I'm grateful for. So then we see too, like activists. We had an activist in Indiana who used the data off our site to prove that the Speaker of the House in Indiana was using campaign finance funds and access to campaign finance dollars to manipulate members of the Indiana House to force them to vote in alignment with him. So he used our data to prove corruption. And then another favorite story of mine is just a citizen. I got this email that just about made me cry. It's a woman named Nelda, and she wrote me and said that because of me, she was no longer ever because of Transparency USA, she was never going to shop at this particular grocery store ever again. And she said that she'd been poking around on our site. She said, I've shopped at this store my entire life. In fact, when I was 14 years old, my first job was I was a sacker at this grocery store. I've shopped there my entire life, and I was on your site, and I saw that the owner of that grocery store supports some of these defund the police movements. And my family is third-generation police officers. And so I was actually shopping and giving my dollars to someone who was undermining the people, my own family's bread and butter. I'll never shop there again. So those kinds of things, from high-dollar donors to elderly grocery shoppers to activists using the data to prove corruption, that's the kind of thing that it's exciting to me and has makes just the facts and figures on the side kind of come to life and meaningful. But I'll tell you about one other thing we do real quickly, and that is we've always done it, but we've started producing content like articles in cooperation with Ballotpedia, and then some of them, in fact, are kind of semi-automated computer-generated articles where we write an article template for one of our states. We basically write the article about a particular state, and then the computer can fill in the blanks for the data for all of the other states. So it's a great way to get content and articles out there at a much lower price than paying reporters on the ground, so I'm really proud of the content. And these are kind of like, a lot of these articles are overview articles. These are the top donors in your state. These are the House reps who've raised the most money. These are the races where the person who raised the most money still didn't win. Those kinds of things that kind of give people an entree, if you will, like, oh, that's the kind of data I can find on their site, so I can go there, oh, I can search around and I can learn more. And then some of it is just general education about money in politics, like what's a political action committee, and when will my donation be reported, when will my donation not be reported, am I going to be doxxed for this, those kinds of questions. And then we also write editorials. Now, we're a nonpartisan organization, but my team and I do write editorials about trying to push back on some of the false narratives about money in politics. So we push back about that there's too much money in politics, that elections are sold to the highest bidder, the candidate with the most money. This whole narrative surrounding dark money, that's really a myth to restrict free speech of average citizens, and to really to give a way for average citizens to be harassed. So
Is
yes,
there any way to find out who's backing that dark money, like for Abbott? They've done a lot of kind of.
well, there's no, I mean, that's the term. So this is kind of what we do. So if you give money directly to a candidate or a campaign, that money, that donation, and if it's over, I think the minimum, I get confused because it's different in all the states, but I think in Texas it's over $50. Then that candidate or political action committee has to report every person who gives the money, where it comes from, where they work, like their employer, their occupation, and their address. So it's a lot of data. Now, and that applies to money given to PACs, super PACs, and directly to candidates. Now, the only money, this dark money, is in this other category that's generally charitable giving. So if you give not to a political action committee who's going to be supporting a campaign, but if you give to like, say, your local Elks Club, or you give to an organization that provides education to someone about politics, or say you give even to an issue advocacy group, so say you give to a local pro-life group, then that money is, that's your charitable giving, and you have a right to privacy in that money. So what I always tell people, so the courts have kind of made this distinction, right? If you give money directly to a candidate or a campaign, they're a PAC, super PAC, any vehicle that goes directly to a candidate or campaign, it's public. On the other hand, if you give to an education or an issue you care about, or a charity, that money is supposed to be kept private. Now, some people say, well, there ought to be more private money. Why are they want to dox, they want to harass? Like what we're seeing is they talk about this private money and they say all this charitable money, those people have to turn over the names of their donors, which is really not a good idea, because what's happened is those donors' names get made public and those donors get harassed. For example, we saw in California, I believe it was in 2015, when our now Vice President Kamala Harris was the Attorney General of California. She said to all those charitable organizations, okay, I know that they have, the Supreme Court says they have a right to privacy, but just tell us the names of all your donors to your charitable organizations or your issue advocacy organizations, and we'll keep them private. Well, oops, they got made public. So the most notorious one was, I can't remember what it was called, but it was a ballot issue about whether marriage would stay between a man and a woman in the state of California. This is 2015, this is before the Supreme Court came out with a book bill. So the people who had given money to this organization that was advocating for marriage to stay between a man and a woman, oops, their donors got made public by the Secretary of State's office accidentally, however you wanted to see it, got released. So a lot of those donors, one of them was a movie producer in California. He lost his job. A lot of them lost their job. Many of them were harassed online and in public. So there is an interest. A lot of times people talk about money in campaigns, this dark money there, But that's kind of a narrative of the left, that they're trying to make the dark money sound a lot bigger than it is. For one thing, it's typically coming from the left, complaining about dark money and saying they want it exposed. But some things you should know, there's a lot more dark money on the left than there is on the right. It's still a relatively small portion in campaigns. All the money in campaigns, dark money accounts for less than 5% of that money. And of the money that actually goes to candidates or incumbents in their races, dark money accounts for less than 1% of those dollars. So kind of the position I take is I would actually like to see more privacy. I would like to see more privacy for individual citizens so they're protected from being doxxed. Because honestly, the super wealthy person who gives $1 million, everybody knows who he is anyway. That comes out. A lot of times they'll talk about that being dark money. They'll say like, oh, George Soros is this dark money donor. Well, he is, but if you know his name, then he's not that dark, right? Like he's not that much in the dark because you know who George Soros is. The real threat of exposing these dark money donors is to the private citizens who don't want to lose their job. And this has actually become a concern on the left and the right. It's one of the few areas that small dollar donors agree on, that grassroots activists agree on. Because the donors to the local Right to Life organization don't want their names made public because they don't want their places of business vandalized. But likewise, the people to, and depending on which neighborhood it is and which community it is, the donor to Planned Parenthood, they don't want their name made public either because they don't want to be harassed by their neighbor either. So we actually see this happening on the small dollar scales. I don't know if that answers your question.
I checked on that ad, I talked about it, that ad could have been worse, the government had it, and the three men.
Yeah, I don't know
It
what.
was from Delaware.
Okay.
That dark money was coming out of Delaware.
Okay, so I haven't seen the ad, so maybe you can tell me what it is, or I don't
Yeah,
know.
it was
We can't speak
I
to
didn't
it.
like the ad, it was a terrible ad about, it could have been worse, it named Abbott, and it named Patrick and Paxton.
Oh.
These three men, and it was a terrible ad.
And you're-
No.
It was about the shooting.
Oh, the Uvalde shooting.
I think there was a generic name, which I never heard. I saw that several
Yeah, I
times.
said the man,
But I never
Pack
heard.
could have been worse, not.
Oh, that's the name of the
LLC or
PAC.
something like that.
Okay,
Could have been worse, LLC.
Yeah, so they may have been able to keep their donors private if the way they said it was that they were advocating for gun violence law.
It came out of Delaware, and then Biden's home state.
Yeah. So anyway, that's sort of what we do. Those are the issues we talk about. But really, I'd like to just know what you guys hear about this, or if I can answer any questions about money or your candidates, or
Tell me this, is it getting harder to follow the money? I mean, the technology, we go through the computers and so forth. But I mean, when I first started into the politics, really delving into trying to find out who these people were, it was pretty easy to follow them up.
yeah.
But now it seems to be harder. I mean, probably not to you, but to the layperson.
Yeah, well, I think that's what we're trying to address. We're trying to make it easy to search and easy to find it. And at least we can put it online now, so you don't have to go to down to Austin to look through paper records. And it depends state by state. Some states it's easier, and some states it's harder.
Well, I mean, I used to be able to just go online and click into this particular web, and all the candidates would come up, and it had all the donations.
Well, you can do it on our site, for sure. Yes, sir. Yeah.
So, part of my problem, like with Texas Ethics Commission, is when candidates do things that are wrong, and it's on record, and somebody points it out, nothing happens. Right? It's like they protect the incumbents.
Yeah.
Have you noticed that? And what can we do about that?
I do know what you're talking about. I don't know, what I would say is that, write your legislator or talk to your legislator.
What
Like
if
they,
he's part of the problem?
Who are your legislators here are Bob Hall and Keith Bell?
Not Bob Hall.
Bob Hall.
Bob Hall's our representative.
Yeah, he's your senator, right? Yeah, and then you've got, is it Keith Bell? Is that
Yes.
who you're? Yeah. So I think that honestly, those letters make more of a difference than you think. That's what I hear, is that they think for every letter or email they get, they assume that there are many, many more behind it, and they actually can get spooked by the letters. Well, the first part, the TEC, I think that they do like to pick on people that don't align with their beliefs.
It's like they're part of the club now, you know? It should be independent.
Right, well, that's the problem that we're trying to solve, for sure. What else? When you guys hear about money in politics, or your friends or neighbors talk about it, like what kind of things do you hear, or what questions are there, or is there anything? I just love to hear what's out there when we're thinking about writing content, so we might answer some real life
I just
questions.
saw a big headline, Fox News about how, candidates, kinfolks, big time on the paper. All the-
Right.
It's been going on for years.
Well, that's one thing we're doing. You can see every dollar that every campaign is spending, like where it's going. They have to report what it's for, if it's for expenses. We used to write an article at the end of every year. I didn't do it last year. We were too busy. But it was like the top craziest things that Texas legislators were spending money on. And you would be astounded. Some of them would spend an insane amount on flowers, like floral arrangements.
Come to find out their daughter works at the flower shop.
Right, or you wonder which women are getting all those flowers. Like I did.
We just read about a year ago, one of the Democrats, the big name Democrats, had her daughter on the payroll and paid her $965,000 a year. for
Yeah.
consulting.
I'm sure you see that a lot.
Is it-
Oh, we'll see people running their dry cleaning, their car washes, their tire changes, their all kinds of stuff through their campaign accounts. Their club memberships to their cigar club, their Sirius XM radio membership. What'd you say?
Numerous vacations.
Yes, yeah.
Are district attorneys considered state
Yes, sir.
office holders?
No, well, your attorney general, like Ken Paxton, is on our side. Now, your local DAs are not. It kind of depends. Some counties, some will turn in their campaign finance records to Austin. So some of the counties will have it, but not uniformly. So the way I like to tell people about what's on our site is if someone works in DC, they're not going to be on our site. If they work in Austin, you'll find them on our website. And then some people in your local governments, your mayors, attorney generals, some of them you can find. It kind of depends. We'd love to get into that local, to start getting those local candidates, but it's hard because it's on typically, if they don't turn it into Austin, it's in on all the county websites. And you can imagine that's a lot of manpower to go get that. We just don't have manpower to get the county stuff yet. We've written about some of that. We've followed some of the governor's races in Texas. And then the DA's races are really interesting when there's a lot of money from George Soros coming into DA races in our big cities especially. So, what else? What else can I tell you?
One last thing in my mind.
Yeah.
The Speaker of the House. Of course, he likes to choose, appoint Democrats as chairs and so forth. And so I'd like to know how much money, just in a way that our Republican Speaker is getting from the Democrat Party.
That's a great question. I'll look it up before I go and we'll see. I'll see. It's probably from some Democrat-controlled PACs primarily. But you know, he got elected. He couldn't have gotten his seat as Speaker without Democrats voting for him.
Right.
So he obviously had to promise things to those Democrats to get their vote, to become, which, so you know, that's kind of, it's a hot topic right now, and I completely agree with you. Like, I think the party in charge ought to put people in charge of the committees.
They
And
do
they're saying,
have it in Texas.
Right, it's very uncommon. But the step behind that is that probably only if Republicans have the majority in the House, or the Democrats have the majority in the House, then probably only that party should vote on who the speaker's gonna be.
That's right.
So that's in my mind, the issue before you even get to the committee chairs. And if you're gonna give committee chairs to people in the opposite party, don't give them the most powerful committees. You know, don't put them in charge of committees where they can absolutely kill bills or kill important bills, so.
It's gonna be a huge thing this time.
Yeah, but that's an opportunity, that's where the grassroots activists need to put pressure. I think there's two things that you guys can do, is put pressure on that, on the committee chairmanships. And then, did y'all hear that in the Beto, Abbott debate, this is off topic for me, this is not about campaign finance, but it's just near and dear to my heart, but Abbott actually came out and said he wants to eliminate the school property taxes.
Yes.
And Texas Public Policy Foundation has actually rolled out a program, so it's not just talk, it's like, here's the numbers, here's how we can do it, here's how we can get rid of our property taxes without hurting our schools. It really literally can be done, but Texans could actually own their homes. And it's the first time ever that Greg Abbott has come out and said that. And so now I think it's
Maybe
up
because
to.
Allen West was pushing it?
Yes, I mean,
Don
honestly,
Huffman.
and
Don
both of them,
West.
Yeah.
both of them, I mean,
Both of them
honestly,
were.
we're pushing him on that and some other good things he's done. But I think that now it's time we've got to say, okay, Greg Abbott, you said it.
Well, he put his foot in his mouth now.
Yeah, like now we can hold him to it. It's the first time he's actually said he'll do something. They're gonna have a $27 billion surplus. So,
But he won't
That's,
steal
yeah,
more.
their fund balance, it was actually 28 million, but, you know, it's 27 like 999.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, it's $28 billion that they actually rolled forward.
yeah.
I was on the legislative priority committee at the convention this year.
I'm sorry, the what?
The legislative,
Okay.
at the
Uh-huh.
state convention. And, you know, this really is not a legislative issue in a sense, but I told everybody in there, if we don't make it a priority to eliminate Democratic chairs, if the Republicans own the House, I mean, we see this every year. 3/4 of our bills get killed under a Democratic chair. This has got to be done, and that ended up being the #2 legislative priority for Texas.
That's so important, so good. You need to watch who they put on the calendars committee too. That's where they
Yeah.
kill a bunch of bills or slow roll them until they're dead.
That's the way they do it in a hidden way. A lot of times it's out in the public, it's whoever the chair is for that heard that issue. But if it, sometimes they'll let it get through there and then kill it
Then
in
kill it.
calendars.
Right.
I got a question.
Yeah.
On the phone, it doesn't allow you to do search, but I guess on the computer, it has a search deal.
Yes, sure does.
Can you like search companies by categories and everything like that as far as?
No, you can't. You can't search by categories. We've done this before. We did some research and some writing on green energy companies on our site after the big Snowmageddon, Ice-mageddon thing we had in early 2021 to look at the influence of green energy companies on our legislators. And at that time, because we don't get, like, we get employer from donors, but we don't know the industry. So sometimes something can say,
You can search the company name.
you can search a company name, yes, you absolutely can search a company name, but you have to know who they are. You can't search by industry. So we actually paid for 2 different organizations that do industry categorization and ran our data through that. We didn't get good results. It's really hard. But if you know a company name, you absolutely can search by company name. Yeah. Anything else? If not,
Thank you
that's
for
all I
coming.
have. Yeah, I'm so
Appreciate
glad.
it.
I'm gonna look up Dave Phelan. You're the one that asked me about Dave Phelan.
Right.
I'm gonna look up for you. And before I forget, I brought you guys, in case any of you want one, and maybe your kids, grandkids, want it, but, I brought some stickers. If anybody wants one, I'll just leave them up here. But thank you guys for having me. Thank you for caring.